powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher is here. And we're going to talk a little bit about what was really something that I don't know that a lot of people said, man, this is going to be a 28-point blowout. I don't know that so many people are surprised by the fact that the Eagles lost the game as much it was how they lost the game. Let's bring Geoff Mosher into the conversation and kind of get the feedback that you guys were getting on the postgame last night. Geoff, obviously the Eagles 10-1, they've had a lot of success, but did people feel like this was coming, like this was going to happen? Were people surprised at how it happened? Give us a little bit of the feedback that you guys were getting in those post-game reactions.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, Mike, because even before the feedback, if you think about how we previewed the game on Inside the Birds and what we talked about last week, I picked the Eagles to win, but a close game, but my heart, I almost was trying to talk myself out of it. I thought there's so many reasons why the Niners could and should win the game. That not just Cunningham and Dallas being out, although that's part of it. But just the Eagles living dangerously, all the games that they played, the overtime, the Niners at extra rest. And I even said on the pod to Adam, after picking the Eagles to win, I said, I'll pick the Eagles to win, but if they do lose, it would not surprise me if they lose big, like double-digit loss. I said, I don't think they'll lose a close game. Mm-hmm. I said, I think they can win a close game, but if they lose, I think the roof caves in. And that's kind of what happened. And that's, it's part of sort of that week-to-week NFL thing where I know that everybody's seeing what they saw last and now very concerned about the Eagles. And there are obvious concerns that we've talked about that they've been able to cover up. But it did not sort of surprise me, the manner in which they lost or the final score, because there was some sort of a walking into a buzzsaw effect for the Eagles going into that game.
We got a text from a listener earlier right at the end of the hour. I thought it was a good question, so I'll ask you. Colin in Cape May Courthouse says, guys, the narrative on the Eagles so far has been they haven't played their best yet, but keep finding ways to win. Does yesterday's game change the narrative to maybe we've seen about as good as the Eagles are, and that's not good enough?
Well, that is a good question. Is that Colin Thompson masquerading as Colin in Cape May County?
No, Colin in Cape May Courthouse. If it is the same guy, who's the guy who brought me the beer at the 99 bottles last week.
Nice. Well, I guess there are two smart Collins that are down that way. You know what? I mean, it's a fair question. Look, the Eagles are a very good team. You don't get to 10-1 just by sort of like covering up your mistakes and being average. They still have a really good 53. They can finish strong here. But to Colin's point, they have deficiencies that are more glaring. And we've talked about these, right, than say, last year's deficiencies. And most of them are on defense, although even offensively they're not as crisp this year as they were last year. So when they play a team that – and there's not that many that I can say are like this, but the Niners are one. The Niners, you can say, are as good, if not better, than the Philadelphia Eagles. So when you play that team, you have to play your best game. Clearly, the Eagles did not. They missed a lot of tackles. They did not run the ball very well. They did not run the ball very often, which Nick Sirianni, in retrospect today, acknowledged in his press conference. They didn't do things that they've customarily done when they win games, whether it's an easy win or a little squeaker there. And that's because the 49ers are that good, too. I mean, the Dallas game, they won the Dallas game. Did they dominate Dallas? No. Could they have easily lost that game? Yes. So, and then this Sunday we'll see what happens. But that's the point. When you're playing really good teams who are at your level or a little bit above it, you can't play that kind of game.
All right, you mentioned struggles in the ground game on offense and stopping the ground game, Moshe, on defense. So just get into that a little bit more, and I'll ask this. Which is of greater concern to you? The lack of rushing attack on offense as of late, particularly Swift not getting going really at all in a few games, and or I should say the run defense?
That's a really good question, Ryan, because it could be one or the other, but my lean while it looked really ugly defensively, is that offensively, given who the Eagles are, and I think that's a big part of the context of the conversation, knowing, like we've talked about, that this defense is not just going to dramatically improve overnight. It's not going to be a lockdown defense by Sunday or 2 Sundays from now or in the playoffs. It's just not, right? That means to me that the Eagles offense, which has far more talent on it, has to be at its best week in and week out, especially against the good teams. They have to score 25 to 35 points. And if they're struggling, if they're disjointed, if there's no rhythm in the run game like you just talked about, and they're not scoring points, there's no way they're going to win a playoff game 13 to 10. I just don't see that happening. They've got to be great offensively. So I come out of this game, and despite all the missed tackles and despite almost looking foolish and embarrassed on defense, I come out of this game saying they blew this by being up 6-0 instead of 14-0, by having not a very bad red zone offense after being really good the prior 3 games. Because if you're up 14-0 against the Niners, who are infamous for being a front-runner type team that does not play well from behind, that does not play well when it has to go off script. If you're up 14-0 on the Niners when you had that opportunity, then you probably change the way Kyle Shanahan has to play call and approach that game. And because they weren't, because it was a one-possession game and only a 6-0 lead, all it took was one good drive for the 49ers to take the lead and then be able to do what they wanted to do offensively. It is up to the Eagles offense from here on out in every game to be lethal like it has been last year and for most of this year.
What did you see from San Francisco defensively in their game plan that seemed to work so well, right? I mean, Jalen it felt like he had all the time in the world, so much in the pocket. He was just pointing, like, go deep, go this way, go here. He was just the maestro at times back there with all the time in the world, and he couldn't really make anything happen. So was that more about San Fran, more about the offense, a little bit of both? What did you see, Moshe?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you what I saw, but obviously sometimes you watch the All-22 and you realize something different happened. I mean, the 49ers play mostly zone. I think they're the number 1 zone team in the NFL, and they obviously have a great front 4 rush. Like you mentioned, the Eagles kind of kept that pass rush at bay. They did a good job on the offensive line of keeping guys like Chase Young and Nick Bosa from just wrecking the game. So why couldn't Eagles wide receivers get open? That to me is a big question, especially with the 49ers. You know, they don't have their all-pro safety, Hufanga, and they don't have great cornerbacks compared to some other good defensive teams. So I'm very curious. You know, my initial read on that would be that maybe Jalen just wasn't seeing it, because it's hard for me to believe that guys can have that much. He can have that much protection, and guys couldn't be open with the amount of talent the Eagles have in their pass catching core. It's possible, but I'll have to see. And then if they weren't open because the Niners did a great job in their zones of dropping 7, well, then that's where you as Jalen Hurts have to take underneath patterns. You have to run the ball, and, you know, a couple of those called runs, dial up your own number, up to the Eagles offensive coaches to recognize that and maybe get the ball to the running backs a little more, or the short passing game. It sort of felt like the Eagles were trying to go for the jugular really quickly in this game. They hit some nice little underneath stuff early, well, the slant, to A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown, yeah.
Right, but then that went away, and then when you see Jalen kind of backing up, pointing to A.J., trying to get him, to run a different route in the end zone, like that, you can't do that. You can't do that against the 49ers defense. You've got to make a decision much quicker, and I don't think that happened from the second quarter on.
So obviously they missed Dallas Goedert, right? I mean, of course, Captain Obvious statement, but I've been scratching my head on how they've decided to go about game plans and play calling in his absence, right? Like, it's just, there hasn't been much Julio Jones, and I don't know if he has, an ounce of athletic ability left in his body. I don't know, but there's no Jake Stahl, there's no tight end anywhere to be found, and there's really nothing. I don't know. There's nothing that's changed. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, how do you assess what they've done in Goddard's absence? And maybe he'll be back next week, maybe he won't, but what do they need to change from that aspect?
That's a good question, right? I thought against the Bills, right, they played a lot more 10 personnel, which is basically 1 running back, no tight ends, 4 wide receivers. They got Julio in the slot. They did play some 11 personnel, one tight end with Albert O, and tried to get him involved a little bit more, obviously, without Goddard. And I thought that they did a better job of doing that, of spreading the ball around. I don't remember exactly. I thought Julio had a couple of catches. I know he had some targets. I know they threw to DeAndre a little bit in that game. They're doing that as well. There is no one person who is inheriting the role that Goddard leaves behind. It has been a committee approach, and in this game in particular, I agree with you. They were not able to compensate the way they were against Buffalo, and then the game before I guess they lost them against Dallas. So
yeah.
I think they've probably got to do a better job about that. But then again, I also think that there's a reason why Dallas Goedert is a top 3, top 4 tight end, and when you go to your next guy up, it becomes a different kind of conversation, and you have to piecemeal it. And against a really good defense like the Niners, that's probably going to be more glaring than when you're playing the Bills, who are good but not great defensively.
Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Shaq Leonard, we talked about him last week. Why is he available? Why did the Colts get rid of him? They signed him today. After what you watched yesterday, does that help? I mean, I don't know that we know the answer to this question, but are you hearing anything about Leonard and the style that he might add? I mean, obviously, and here's another thing, Moshe. I don't know how to quantify what Zach Cunningham brings to this team. We just haven't seen him enough, and not a lot of teams have a tight end or really an underneath game that can get you so good like San Francisco. So kind of give me your thoughts on the gap between what San Francisco offense does and where Philadelphia is obviously deficient and what they added today with Leonard.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this a lot since yesterday, and again, can't wait to sort of watch the All-22. But I would say this, based on what you're asking, Mike, the way that game was played, I don't think the difference is you sub Zach Cunningham in for Christian Ellis, you sub Dallas Goedert in for whoever, right, Jack Stoll, and you're winning that game easily, or you're even winning that game. You're preordained to win that game. Is it closer? Probably. Does Zach Cunningham make more plays than Christian Ellis? I think we could all say that. I think Dallas Goedert not being there hurt them in those 2 red zone possessions, even though they did really well in the red zone without him against the Bills. But this is a very good 49ers team. I predicted them to go to the Super Bowl before the season, so I had Niners Chiefs. We'll see. I think, again, it could have made a difference as far as keeping this game manageable, but Nick Morrow got exposed. James Bradbury got exposed. Darius Slay didn't make tackles either. So at the end of the day, your point is valid. Is the sample size on Zach Cunningham as an Eagles linebacker kind of small? Shaq Leonard, who is being paid $6 million to not play for a Colts team that is playoff contending, right? It's one thing if the Bills are out or the Colts are out of it, they're just shedding whatever they can, trying to get draft picks, trying to just get rid of or play young players. No, they're contending for the playoffs, and they basically told you, we'd rather pay this guy $6 million not to play. I think that's pretty obvious. That's what Adam and I have been told the same from personnel sports sources we speak to. So this is not a panacea where Shaq Leonard signs with the Eagles, and the next thing you know, they're the 85 Bears. So
did Howie get swindled? It's not possible for Howie to get swindled, right? There's no way.
Well, I don't think it's well. First of all, they're probably not giving up much, right? And I get I like the joke because
I mean, it was a signing.
Look at the linebacker situation this year and say, wait a minute, you've been going all year with 2 linebackers that you cut. You cut these guys and brought them back. Especially when it's Ellis and Morrow. So yeah, they certainly did not pay a lot of attention to this position after having one of their best seasons ever at that position last year. So it's certainly a topic of conversation. But, yeah, I don't think Shaq Leonard steps in and you replay this game, and all of a sudden the 49ers are like, damn, we can't move the ball against the Eagles.
Well, Moshe, I mean, Okay, so you just said you've been thinking about this. Okay, Zach Cunningham's back. I guess one question would be, Cunningham and Leonard, are they your 2 stars? Is Morrow now the odd man out here? Are Leonard and Cunningham 2 guys that can play together? I mean, are they different? Or are they repetitive? Because I guess you look around and say, all right, what happened to us yesterday? Where our linebackers got picked on big time. We missed a lot of tackles in the secondary. You're the defensive coordinator. You're looking around and saying, okay, what can I do to fix this? And he looks in his roster and says, well, I don't have any linebackers that I can really go to fix this, so I got to go outside the organization. But what is the configuration at linebacker now in your mind? Is this Cunningham and Leonard? Are they the two guys?
Well, I think what we've learned from watching Sean Desai this year, Mike, is that there is no starter A and starter B at certain positions, like nickel, like linebacker, second safety, even corner, right? We've seen a lot, and certainly on the defensive line. I think what you're going to see, and by the way, I don't know if this question is answerable for me or Sean Desai yet until they actually look at Shaq Leonard on the practice field and see exactly what they got. This isn't like when you sign Linval Joseph and you say, you're here to stop the run. You're a big dude. You know what you got to do, right? And he goes out there and does it. I mean, there's a whole lot of keys and responsibilities, and it's not just stopping the run. It's defending the pass. It's not just playing one way. There's zone. There's man, right? They have to actually see what Shaq Leonard does in practice this week to be convinced that he should be playing over anybody.
Right.
So that's a question that I look forward to see being answered on Sunday. But no matter what they see from Shaq Leonard, the way we've seen Sean Desai operate this year when he's sort of piecemealing is that he's going to have linebacker. Even when Nakobe Dean was healthy, right, he was rotating with Morrow and Cunningham. So I think that you're just going to see rotations based on down, distance, packaging, and it wouldn't shock me if you do see Leonard in. It's more run. It's got to be run. It's goal line. It's short yardage.
Well, then that doesn't.
But
right. But then the answer to the big picture question is that didn't fix anything. I mean, right? I mean, if you got a linebacker in here that isn't going to help you, I don't know about you guys. When I look at things, I don't look at a game or something. I look at the big picture. And if I get matched up with them again, is Shaq Leonard helping me defend George Kittle or McCaffrey? And I would say the answer to that seems to be no.
Yeah, I think just to jump in, Moshe, you made a good point. He might not even be good enough to start or play. Right? Like we're just assuming.
I would have to assume if he made the decision to come here, it's because he was told he's going to play, right?
Well, yeah, until he puts the pads on.
I mean, I think that if you're the Cowboys or the Eagles, what you have to say is that there's an opportunity for you to play here, but nothing is just handed to you. I mean, I know he's Shaq Leonard. I know that fans might have a hard time understanding that given his pedigree, but it's not like he had 11 teams calling him up. He visited 2 teams. They're 2 good teams that just happen to have really, really, I don't want to say bad, they're struggling at linebacker. So those are the teams that are naturally going to want him, but they can't just sit there and say, you're going to play 80% of the day. I mean, he wasn't even playing for the Colts. So that's why they have to be judicious. And to your guys' point, can he help you against in any – well, you're about to play the Dallas Cowboys, who have a pretty lethal passing attack, and they have 2 tight ends who are pretty good, right? So the Cowboys – you think you might be getting help in the run game by putting Leonard on the field, and all of a sudden the Cowboys are coming out with 2 tight ends, right, which draws your linebackers as a counter. You're in your sort of nickel base. And then the Cowboys are like, okay, now we check into our pass. We take Ferguson, we spread him out, or we just have him released immediately, and now we're passing against your quote-unquote run linebacking defense. Good luck. We'll pass on first down. The Cowboys will pass on first down. The 49ers pass on first down. Anybody who has a good passing game will pass on first down out of a formation that looks like a run formation, 12 personnel, because they know that they'll have good matchups there.
We'll see. I mean, that is a spot where I think, we talked about this earlier, Jeff, back in the 90s, if Dallas had Irvin, you would go out and get Bobby Taylor, right? If they had big receivers, we need big corners. It feels like Philly did not build their roster based on the strengths of their biggest opponent, San Francisco, who beats teams in the middle of the field, and Philadelphia's weakest spot on the field is the middle of the field. It almost feels to me that Philadelphia puts all their eggs, and look, they're 10-1. They went to the Super Bowl last year. This isn't a knock on them, but they put all their eggs in the pass rush. And if their pass rush isn't getting the job done, they got an uphill battle.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if you look back on the season and we're doing a postmortem and things end short of a Super Bowl, we say, you know what, 2 years ago, they got such good they had dynamic play from T.J. Edwards. Not great, but dynamic enough. He was there. He was sure. He was reliable. He made plays. He broke up passes for a guy in coverage. Did a good job of that. And then Kaiser White was fast. You can get to the ball. Yeah, you can kind of run into him a few times because he wasn't big. but you don't have that same level of quickness, of dynamic play at the middle of the field this year, and not only having the same level, but you have quite a big drop off to the point where your pass rush couldn't save you on that.
Yeah. And look, I want to flip over real quick to the defensive side of the ball in terms of the blitz. They blitzed a lot yesterday, and it did not work.
Yeah. Well, you get caught upfield, you're flowing one way, and the 49ers flowed the other way.
Just real quick, let me give the numbers for the listeners out there, Moshe. The Eagles, Purdy was 10 of 11 for 213 yards and 3 touchdowns when the Eagles blitzed yesterday. So for all the Eagles fans who want them to blitz, it did not work yesterday.
And now here's what's interesting about that is normally when you blitz that much and you get beat over the top, because when you're blitzing, you're usually in man coverage and you're able to throw the ball over the top. Sometimes the safety's coming and there's only one guy back there. They had great blitz beaters over the middle of the field because Brock Purdy wasn't holding on to the ball very long. So they must have anticipated some pressure because Natai has been doing that way more than Gannon did. And B, they knew that their best matchups were their guys over the middle, not necessarily on the perimeter, although I think they got Ayuk on Bradbury a couple of times. But for the most part, you didn't see the ball in the air for 40, 50 yards. You saw runners catching the ball and then running 30 to 40 to 50 yards.
All right, Geoff Mosher, there you go, from the Inside the Birds podcast. InsideTheBirds.com. One loss, it gets a little crazy sometimes, but I wonder if this one has a little bit more merit. And now, I do want to ask you this, because this didn't come up a lot. I feel like a lot of people are just kind of, I feel like, and it's good, that a lot of the Eagles fans have not wanted to be making excuses. I think a lot of Eagles fans realize they were not the better team yesterday, and they just got physically beat up by a better team. But how much do you look at that and say, well, yeah, they played 3 games in 13 days, and San Francisco had 10 days off to get ready for this game?
I think that's a big part of it. I do. I don't think if the Eagles play this 49ers team 10 times, they lose 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10 times by 25 points or whatever it was. I think that if all things are considered, if they have, Cunningham and they have Goddard, and even if 49ers have Greenlaw the whole game, but like both teams are basically healthy, and both teams have the same amount of rest and it's a neutral field, then it's a closer game. But I do think the 49ers are the best team in football. I thought that from the beginning of the year. I thought when they lost 3 games in a row, their injuries really hurt them. The Eagles are deeper. So their injuries don't hurt them as much. But as I always say, in a one-game playoff, your depth helps you win regular season games. In a one-game playoff, it's about your 22 versus the other team's 22, assuming you're as healthy as you can be, and same thing with the other team, right? And that's where it matters, and I do believe – and you can, listen, I could be wrong. I think it's close. I just think the 49ers are a little bit more well-rounded in their starting 22 versus the Eagles.
Well, I think that's where
it's a big difference.
It's where they're well-rounded. You're weak at linebacker. They're good at positions where linebackers are needed. Right?
100%.
And so it's different if it's like, well, that's why, like with Dallas, Philly can mask that against Dallas because Dallas isn't as, they don't use the running back over the middle as much. They don't use the tight end. Ferguson's not as big of a threat. And they don't, the middle of the field is not as where they do their damage like San Francisco does.
Point.
So,
great point. It's a matchup game.
Yeah, and you can mask your deficiencies against Dallas a little bit more because Ferguson's good, but he's not George Kittle. For God's sake, we're watching Ferguson on the screen up here. But you have, the matchups and the style of what Dallas does offensively. You match up with them a little bit better. Your personnel. Now, conversely, Philly puts so much eggs in their pass rush basket, and you would think that you should have had better success. And they did early in the game. It felt like they were in Purdy's face for the first 6 plays in the game.
-6 yards.
Yeah. So that was something there. All right. A lot more on this game throughout the week on Football at 4. And, of course, it's Dallas week as well, and that game has now turned into – now, keep this in mind. We talked about this earlier. If Dallas wins the game, they would both have 3 losses. Philadelphia would still have the tiebreaker. If they both finish 14-3, Philly would win the division at 14-3 and Dallas 14-3. So even if Dallas wins this week, they will not be in first place in the NFC East. But a Dallas win this week and a San Francisco win means Philly would fall from the 1 seed to the 2 seed, and that is significant. Jeff, we'll look forward to talking to you Wednesday, bud.
How ironic, by the way, and I look forward to it too, is the fact that the 49ers are now playing Seattle, the Eagles are playing Dallas, and Dallas just played Seattle in their last game. Weird, right?
And by the way, Philly's
Gino.
playing another team coming off of 10 days of rest.
Oh, of course.
For the second week in a
weird
row.
schedule for the Eagles this year. Yep.
It is a little bit of a quirk in the schedule. All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast at InsideTheBirds.com. Of course, you can check that out on all their social media platforms and listen to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast.